Hola.
Hello, welcome to the fourth and final part of the Hidden Questions Health, which will be about, all of our health, which, we're all concerned about. When we speak about health, certain health conditions come up, disease, diabetes. However, we'll be seeking to identify the underlying problems which has led to health being one of the most prevalent issues within the black community and a subject touched upon by Hidden Colours 4. We intend to look into health and the wider effects that it has in our communities, other than the obvious culprits. Hidden Solutions Health seeks to delve in and provide answers to allow black people anywhere within the world to make immediate positive changes to their lives in that moment and give them skills to do so. So without further ado, we are pleased to bring you the first trustee, Kurt.
Hello there.
Hello, hi, nice to see you.
You too.
Great. So we're going to be talking about health today.
All right. What about it?
Well, obviously, it's a very important, um, you know, consideration in our community because we suffer from, a lot of things, and we would like to know, what is the root cause of these things?
All right. Health is a every. Ultimately, you can almost say everything is health. And if you, it's so many. Obviously, there's like you said earlier, diabetes, and we have the number one, at least in the state side, the number one killer for African Americans is cardiovascular disease, followed right under by I think it's diabetes is number two, and then you have there's a bunch of things. It's like a top five list. You can Google it real quick. But either way, we're being our health is a major issue, and it affects everything we do.
Definitely.
So health, really, when you look at health, it can really be summed up, from my understanding of it, to one thing. In majority, I'm like, if you solve this one problem, you ultimately can eliminate, I say about 80% of the health issues we have.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Tell me more.
So really, what it is for health is going to be the number one issue we have for health is not diabetes, it's not high blood pressure, it's not hypertension, I think, and it's not cardiovascular disease. These are only symptoms of the actual underlying cause, which is stress.
Okay, and is that the one thing that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, stress is the number one. I would say stress is the number one killer of African Americans in Western civilization. It's
Okay.
everything else is stress related diseases, and that may be a more accurate way of saying what the problem is in the black community when it comes to health. It's not those things directly because those are just symptoms of the underlying cause.
Okay. So, see, we're talking about stress, being the main thing. So in our communities, what does that derive from? Are we talking about like our environment or, like work, school, university?
I would say all of the above.
Okay.
Really, when it comes to health, we have to. When I say stress is the core issue, stress doesn't manifest itself. It comes from something. And the definition of stress is an external stimulus that causes that the body is responding to. So what
Okay.
is it external of us that is causing this massive stress? And when you start breaking it down, it's very easy to get kind of focused on certain things and you want to start blaming and playing the blame game. And you
Okay.
want to say, a lot of, I think in the conscious movement, you'll have people that say white supremacy. Well, I would say that's not true. You have, if you're a doctor, you're going to say, your health and your diet, or some people want to say that. That's not it either. That helps, but it's not the core issue when it comes to why we're called stress. would be the status quo in modern society, and everyone trying to achieve that status quo.
So how does stress cause these health issues?
Well, stress causes the issues because we have to look. In the previous talks, we talked about the actual what man is and how we kind of layered it up, getting to that standpoint of and getting to the standpoint of understanding the human being and the human body. And this is no different. When we talk about stress, stress dumps chemicals into the body. Those chemicals cause reactions. Now, stress is the body can handle short-term stress. You're talking about a couple minutes. It's really a fight or flight situation. There's a grizzly bear in front of me. Either I'm going to fight this thing because I have maybe a spear or some other whatever reason I'll be standing in front of a grizzly bear. But I'm either going to fight this thing or I'm going to run for my life. It's one or the other. And so what happens when stress, when it comes, it cuts everything off in the body. It creates high blood pressure. But in this situation, high blood pressure is important because it forces blood into your muscles to respond immediately to everything. And it's forcing everything into your muscles. So high blood pressure in the short term is good. It causes you to, it cuts off your libido. So you shouldn't be getting a hard on while you're trying to save your life from a bear.
I agree. You should be running for your life.
Yeah, it cuts off your like your bowel movements. So you're not, you don't have to pee, you don't have to poop, because you either have to run for your life or you're going to fight. So everything shuts down to the most essential survival elements at that very moment.
Okay.
That's what stress does.
Bad in the long term?
Now, in the long term, it's bad because of high blood pressure. High blood pressure over the long term is not good. One of the main chemicals that when people talk about stress, I guess one of the more common facts is cortisol. Cortisol will be dumped into the bloodstream. And the problem with cortisol is that in the short term, it helps you do a lot of things in that grizzly bear situation. In the long term, it wreaks havoc on your body. It stresses your organs because it takes a lot of energy for the body to create cortisol. And then it takes a long time.
What does cortisol do?
Cortisol does a series of things. It's kind of some of the things I just mentioned earlier is caused by cortisol. I don't have the things pulled up right in front of me. Maybe I'll get them pulled up in a second.
Okay.
But cortisol, it does a series of things. And the problem is over the long term, it wreaks havoc on your organs. Okay. And what the problem is for a lot of us is that we look for immediate gratification. And you're looking for, I feel pain right now, so I know this is bad. This doesn't work like that. Your body, your internal organs are being torn apart because of stress. And we just don't understand that.
So how can we get rid of cortisol if we are under stress for a long time? How do we try and get it out of our system?
Well, cortisol, it takes time to leave the bloodstream. To exit out of the body, there's really nothing you can do about it. It just takes time. So the better question is how to avoid stress in the long term, period. Because cortisol is a natural response to stress, so I wouldn't want to try to affect that, because now we're again attacking a symptom and not the source.
Okay. So in the black community, say, we're under stress, we're having all these hormones dumped into our bloodstream, such as cortisol. Where's the root of this? Where is this coming from? What are we doing that is leading to this?
The thing that's leading to this again is the status quo. Well, when I say the status quo, it's the 2.5 kids, the house, the car, the big screen TV, and your subscription to Netflix, and all these things, the way you dress, everything is the status quo. And the belief that we need to have a career to get these things ultimately to get a woman or to get in a relationship with a partner is literally killing us by
So are we
believing
talking
it in
about keeping up with the Joneses, per se?
to a degree, yes. Because it's not necessarily when we talk about keeping up with the Joneses, many people are talking about the fashion and the style or the trends at the moment. And that is a part of it. But I'm talking about the overall picture, that I need to have a house, that I need to have a job, or I need to have a car. I need to look a certain way. I need to be successful. But the problem is these ideas are being projected by someone else. And
Okay.
and then we start thinking they're our ideas, but they're not our ideas. And as we talked about in the topic of relationships, when you program the subconscious, the body will stop at nothing to achieve the very base needs. So if you program the subconscious to say survival means get a career, well, let's think about the stresses of a career.
Hmm.
You got to go to college. In general, we're talking about, I guess, you got to go to college. Now you're put in debt. So now the stress of finding a job is even more important. Then you get out of college and you actually have to find a job. Stressful. If you're black, you may have an issue, depending on what it is. Because in the UK, you guys are only 3%, where over here we're 13%, but it's still an issue all the same.
Hmm.
Then when you get that job, you got to make sure you can maintain that job. Because once you get the job, and let's say your income goes up, your expenses will creep right behind it and go up. So now it's like, okay, now I can afford to get this car. Now you got car payments. Stress, because you have to maintain the car. Especially if you have a really good job, then you're going to say, okay, well, I can afford all these things. But that's the kind of trick. And so you're constantly putting your... So if we got to take a step back. If we look at a pyramid, right? There's not even got to be a pyramid, but priorities. If you put career at the top of your priorities, you will sacrifice your health and your family for your career.
Okay.
And that's where the issue lies. So but if you think about it, everything we're doing is for our family, or potential family, or future family. So for me, it'd be my girlfriend, or finding a good woman. Really is more bad to say. And for me, it's me trying to find a good woman. And if I believe that I have to have a car, and if I believe I need to have a career in order to attract a good mate, I'm going to do everything I can and sacrifice my health and my family for those things.
Okay.
That is killing us because the career itself is stressful.
I see. But are we trying to live up to a culture that isn't on? As in, I mean, European people think they're looking for a house, a car, like you say, sacrifice those things. You know, are we trying to aspire to something that's not really in our culture? Why are we suffering in a different way to, say, other cultures?
I think you just said something you didn't realize what you said. That's not our culture.
Okay.
When we talk about careers and all those things, now, but most person's going to say, obviously, I need to have a career, a job to survive and do all these things. It's not necessarily true.
Okay.
You know, do you need money? Yes. If you plan to stay in this society and living, if you plan to follow the status quo, you will need money and you'll need it consistently coming in.
I agree.
However, is your career worth your life? Let's put it like this. If I get a career to attract the mate, but ultimately my career is killing me, let's say I get into that relationship and then I die. Was it worth doing all that in the first place?
No, not really.
No, but when you think about it, that's what we're doing. Where I'm doing all these things and I'm stressing myself. And then we see the hypertension and we see the cardiovascular disease and we see the diabetes. Those we can feel once we're diagnosed. But if the career itself, the pursuit of happiness, Maisie, I almost call it, if the pursuit of a career to get the status quo lifestyle is ultimately going to kill us, is it worth pursuing?
Well, on the face of it, definitely not. I agree. But say, just to push you a bit more on that point, Kurt, do you think this is related to living in a Western world? You know, obviously we're living, you know, in a different, say, cultural environment to, I don't know, maybe, yeah, we're living in a different cultural environment than maybe our ancestors were used to. Do you think that adds to the pressures and stresses?
Definitely. I think that is living in a modern society is killing us. I would say, as strange as that may sound or controversial as that may sound, living in modern society is literally killing us.
Okay.
The evidence is there. Once you do the research, it's very clear. We have the environmental effects that are killing us, the atmosphere. We know that you have car exhaust. When you get into your car, if you have your car on, I mean, if your car's been sitting in the sun and you open up your door and get right into your car, you're literally poisoning yourself because of the chemicals in the plastic that are being released from the heat. Because obviously your car turns into an oven at that point. So that's being released. You're killing yourself just to get into that car. Yeah, your car is only to go from point A to point B. But then on top, so you have environmental effects. You have, you know, the environmental effects are just numerous. Your water is fluoridated, at least here in the States it's fluoridated. You're brushing your teeth with fluoride. And, you know, the health effects, so you're being attacked from the outside coming in. Then you're being attacked from the inside going out from the stress, which is wreaking havoc on your internal organs and on your body. So you're being attacked from both sides, but for what? To get a career, to find a proper mate, to go in debt over a home, to go in debt over a car, and to go in debt from the education that took you to try to get those, to chase more debt.
Yes, I do agree with you, but I do live in a Western society, and so, but, you are taught we have to, like you say, get a house, get a nice car, and you've said, those things are to our detriment, to our family, our health, so we kind of drop one to gain another. But everyone doesn't, in the extreme, die, say, before they get to that point, but
yeah, of course.
Are we really sacrificing those things? Is it worse for us than others? Because I just really want to pin down the point, our health and the stress that is that we get. Is that all that it comes from, or is that the main root?
The main root would be the stress. Well, like I said, that's one aspect of why we're stressed. That aspect alone causes a multitude of other stresses. Okay. So you have relationship stress, you have status stress, socioeconomic stress. I mean, the list of stresses go on, and then you have to talk about the 3 C's of stress, is what I call them after my research. You have chronic stress, compound stress, and accumulative stress.
Okay.
3 different things. Compound stress is just stress that stacks on top of each other. Mm-hmm. Accumulative stress is stress that builds up, and chronic stress is the stress that is continuous. It just never really goes away. So when you combine all 3 of these, it's like you take stress and cube it. So stress cubed, and you have to think of every stress as a point. When you start cubing numbers, the numbers start multiplying very quickly, and all these stresses are doing that.
Okay, that's very interesting. Maybe I think we could talk about, say, our environment, just to bring the point home to people, maybe to make it relatable. So maybe we could start at the workplace and, the stresses that we gain from there, and how that relates to our stress. I don't know, I'd like to start, if possible, because I do have a small example.
All right.
Black women in general, we get a hard time about our hair and, our styles that we wear, whether we're natural, whether we're weaving, wigging, whatever we're doing. There was a recent article that I read, South African school, and it said it was, they banned afros in the school because it was deemed as untidy. you know, to wear an afro at school. And this is an African nation, you know, it should be the norm, really. You know, obviously we're in a European country and we conform to a certain extent. So, you know, really I want to say, you know, because we're in a European country, we are conforming by, you know, wearing weaves or wigs or straightening our hair. And the stress that it causes, like, I don't know, I don't know if you've been put in that position before, but you go to work, if you've got your hair in, you know, a certain ethnic style, you may get some, you know, looks, or they might say, oh, you've changed your hair, you know, and get some funny looks, you know, per se. So, you know, it is quite stressful, I think, for the black woman and possibly the black male, you know, to having to wear maybe braids, they're not seen as professional, or dreadlocks. You know, sometimes it can be seen as quite scary to other cultures, our hair. So, you know, I just wanted to talk about the environment and just a very small thing, you know, the hair that grows out of your head can cause so much stress just to be professional and presentable, you know, to the world. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, when we talked in our previous webinar, we talked about rights, and what that ultimately is discrimination, because and it's also it's genetic discrimination, it's racial discrimination, because only black people have this type of hair, and it's a bunch of other types of discriminations ultimately, and it is stressful because the problem, see, straight hair, we can say straight hair looks good, right? But the problem is, the main issue with not wearing your hair natural is the health effects of straightening your hair. Whether you do it through hot comb or whether you do it through perm or relaxer. Yes. Technically, it's a relaxer. White women get perms.
And relaxers. Like, I saw this documentary. If you put a Coke can in relaxer and leave it there for like 20 minutes, it will melt the Coke can. So imagine those toxic chemicals.
It's hydrochloric acid. Yeah, like women are literally putting hydrochloric acid on their head, and hydrochloric acid in raw form will melt iron. It will melt through things, and we're putting that on our head to appease the status quo, regardless of our health. So again, you're putting your career at the top, so you're sacrificing your health and you're sacrificing your family. Is it worth it in the long run?
Yes, that's
and when you look at, there have been studies on black women who had autopsies, and they looked at their head. Well, women who had perms their whole entire life, and you could see that the chemicals were leaked into her brain. There was a layer of the chemical between her scalp, I think the dermatitis layer or whatever you say it, and her skull. It's sitting right on her brain. Now imagine the effects of all those chemicals sitting directly on top of your brain.
Yeah.
Internally, we are a bunch of chemicals floating around and doing things. So when you throw in these extra chemicals, it's mainly a negative health effect. It's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your conditions. It's going to affect your overall health when you're doing these perms. But the problem is everyone's used to instant gratification. So they say, oh, I don't feel it. I feel fine. But they can't realize their mood swings. They can't realize their attitude. They can't realize their things because in their mind it's justified in having it. But that is a chemical issue. The minute your mind switches into something, you can't really tell the difference because you think it's me. And then your ego comes in and says, no, you're fine, it's them. So you got a compound of things going on, but the main thing is, how is wearing my hair naturally, the way it's born, unprofessional? That's because it's only unprofessional within the context of the status quo, that you have to look a certain way to be professional. But that's, again, discrimination. So people need to start suing companies, and they need to sue schools. They need to sue the government. They need to sue everybody because it's not discrimination. You can't discriminate against the way I am born.
Yes.
So when you talk about equality, I'm born this way. This is my hair. I can't help it the way it is, but I'm not going to change it for you either, because in order to change it, I must then do damage to myself, which is stressful. So you're adding, if it's not the stress of mental stress of having someone tell you that your hair isn't good enough, on top of the ripple effect of them basically saying you're not pretty enough, which causes a whole other slew of issues for women, on top of the physical effects of stress on the body through the chemicals leaching into your body directly. Is it worth it? Is my question. It's always going to come back to the same question. Is that worth it?
No, obviously not. Not for your health, definitely. Especially the story that you told about the chemicals that were actually, you know, in the person's body. You know, because you think that when you wash out those chemicals, they go, but obviously that's not necessarily the case. But I don't know. I would like to see people more empowered to embrace more natural styles and things like that. It would be nice. I do think things are changing, but yeah, it would be nice to see changes on that, definitely, especially where it affects our health.
Yeah, for me, it's mainly a health thing. For one, natural hair is beautiful. It looks great.
Yes,
But it's mainly a health thing because it has long-reaching. So we're talking about hair, just one aspect of our body, and you can see all the stress involved with our hair alone. Let alone preparing it, just getting it in this form, getting ready to leave the house.
Yeah.
Energy, but that's not a stress that is long-term. That's just I gotta wake up an extra hour just to make sure I comb it and get it prepped and ready. Or if you, depending on how your hair is, you pull it back in a ponytail and poof, you're gone. But even then, that still takes time. You still gotta brush it out, comb it, get it in there, depending on how you slept on it. So you gotta prepare it the night before to make sure you can wake up. So it's a lot involved with preparing our hair. But I'd rather take the time to prepare our hair than to have someone external to me tell me what to do with my hair, which causes stress.
Of course, definitely.
Our hair creates a community. Like when I get my hair braided, well, someone has to braid it, so I have 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on what the hairstyle is, to talk with somebody and to sit down with somebody and do something.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So I would like to go back a bit to some of the chemicals that you were talking about, that you release when you're undergoing stress. We talked a little bit about cortisol, and that raises your blood pressure and, you know, gives you the fight or flight mechanism. Is there any others that we need to know about?
All right, so I got it pulled up.
Okay.
Bigger. I got it pulled up, and so let's go over this. There are a few things that are released through stress. So I said cortisol is the common one that people talk about and how it's done. And once my producer back here figures out what he's doing with his computer, I'll be able to do this.
Yeah, I think cortisol is the main one. I think a lot of people know of that one because, like you say, you know, when that chemical is in your body, it shuts down all the other things that it deems not necessary, you know, luxuries per se. You know, so it's just to get away and, you know, continue to flee whatever stress is happening, or immediate stress or danger that is happening. So yeah, I think that is the main one that people know about.
All right, so we have cortisol. Mm-hmm. There we go. So we have there's a few things that are done with the problem with stress. So you see it on the screen. I have it pulled up, and so on the screen, so you see you have cortisol, which is the main fluid, which balances the blood pressure by regulating some other functions that aren't crucial at the moment. That's why I said it kind of cuts off these things. Your digestion, everything goes to zero because it's not important for your fight or flight situation right there at the moment. But then you have adrenaline. Obviously, adrenaline is for a short. That's what turns you into a superhuman. Ultimately, it increases blood flow, it increases heart output. Everything turns up. Because
like superpower strength to fight something, or
exactly. Everything turns up in a fight. That's what adrenaline does. Now, you will sometimes hear it called epinephrine, but that is the chemical version, the man-made version of adrenaline. So when you have an EpiPen, that's what it's referring to, an EpiPen, where we're going to pump adrenaline into you to kick your body into gear depending on what the situation is. Asthma attacks or stress or trauma, depending on what the situation is, someone may hit you with an EpiPen. They're basically dumping adrenaline into your body to kick it in.
So when would, in our community, we be given an EpiPen?
People with allergies generally have EpiPen to overcome, obviously when you look at what adrenaline does and you can't breathe or whatever's happening, adrenaline will kick your body into gear respond, because hyperventilating is not going to help you while you're in an emergency situation. I'm sure there's a more chemical reason as to why they hit adrenaline in you, but it works. When you're having an allergic reaction, you hit yourself with EpiPen, and then that hopefully should help you. Unless it's really, really severe, then you have bigger problems.
Okay.
Next, you have no adrenaline, and the chemical version, the manufacturer chemical version, is no epinephrine. So adrenaline and no adrenaline, then you have epinephrine and no epinephrine. So no epinephrine gets the body ready for action. It it releases everything. It promotes vigilance, enhances memory. It makes you focus like crazy, and it increases your restlessness and anxiety. When over the long term, it's like, so when you're focused in a short term, that's very, very good. It helps you study for tests better, get ready. Like you have a lot of stress of a test, it helps you focus on studying so you can get things done. But over the long term, if you're constantly focused, you would think that's a good thing, but it's not. With all the things that if you like, it's right there on the screen, so people should be able to read it if it's big enough. So you have blood issues, heart pressure, all these things created by. There we go. That's the size I'm talking about. Now it's just too big because I don't know what he's doing. We're gonna get it together over here. This is why you have people practice things before you get started. There it is. That's good right there. Scroll up a little for me. Brother can't see anymore. There you go. All the way up. No adrenaline. There we go. All right. So you see everything. This is the problem with all these things. So we're going to scroll up to the long-term effects. So these are long-term effects. So cortisol suppresses your immune system. It's linked to cancer. It's linked to heart disease. It's linked to hypertension. Keep going. Come on. Roll with me. Diabetes, decreased libido, which you could call why people try to issue you Viagra. Acne, hormone imbalances, weight gain, mood swings, poor sleep, insomnia, shortened attention span, memory issues, osteoporosis, which is a big issue for black women. It's one of the leading issues for black women. Digestive problems. Adrenaline, it lingers in the body too much. It just wreaks havoc. And no adrenaline is normally present in the body, just to what degree? So those are just some of the issues that that it causes, and we've gone deep. If we showed you the bubble that we have a mind map, and it just keeps growing and growing when you look at the effects of stress and where it keeps going and going.
Are there any physical symptoms that we can identify that would let us know that we're under a long-term stress, which is the worst one for us?
That's the problem, and that's the major problem. So last time we talked about health being zero. We talked about health briefly in the last one. I said the body always sets itself to zero. Zero is normal. However, most people are somewhere hovering around -3, -4. That's just health-wise, and the body will adapt and bring your new zero to -3, so it feels normal to you. Stress is the same way. Stress is something that slowly creeps up on you, and you keep getting more and more stress, which brings you down here. And what your body does, it gets used to the stress, and then it now is a normal stress state, feels normal to you. And you don't know the difference between not being stressed and being normal. Which, when you're not stressed, you feel great. But great is just you going back to normal. So that's the main issue with stress. That's why it's called the silent killer. It slowly creeps up on you, and you just get more and more stress. And what we're used to is dealing with immediate stress, which is acute stress. Like you're stressed. Thinking about a big presentation before you go into work that you have to have. That's stress. All right.
Bless you.
So that's stress. That's major stress. And you can feel that immediately. But you're looking for that same feeling for overall stress. It just doesn't work like that. That's not how the body works.
Of course.
And when you pay attention, when you do any studying of stress relief, they have a lot of things like, go outside, take a break, you know, go find some way to release your stress. But that therein lies the problem. These are only temporary stress reliefs. And they don't put the word temporary there because the main thing is the stress of modern society. Your being in this society is what's causing this stress. Finding temporary solutions to long-term issues is not the answer. It never will be the answer. So it's just like the medical field. We're not curing anything. We're only treating it.
Okay, I understand. But, you know, we are in this environment at the moment, so we might not necessarily be able to remove ourselves straight away. Is there anything that we can do to negate the stress, you know, especially the underlying ones, you know, the silent killer ones, you know, the ones that you're not necessarily thinking about in that moment? Like, I don't know, I like to go to the gym and have a run. You know, I think that gets out a lot of stress. I don't know if that's a temporary thing. Or I don't know what.
Because you always are going to the gym, right?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So now, if that's the reason you're going to the gym, then it's only temporary relieving the stress.
Okay. So what could we do to find something that's more permanent that we could work towards to you know, to relieve some of this?
And this is what we talked about in the very first webinar. The solution. And I talked about everyone needs to grow a garden. Now, maybe people didn't understand what that meant completely, but the garden, to get out of it is a layered approach. It's not going to be, here's one thing that fixes everything.
Of course.
So a garden, when I say grow a garden, that's step one in about a 5 or 6 step process.
So there are layers. Tell us a little bit about the layers.
All right, so step one is grow a garden. And what I'm ultimately saying is that you need to control your food. Because when we talked about environmental effects, remember I said the environmental effects is what's on the outside attacking you this way. Well, on the outside is also food that you put into your body. So that's going from the outside directly inside. And then attacking you the opposite way again.
Sorry to cut you. What should we grow in this garden? What should we concentrate on growing to relieve the stress? Do you mean in the garden we are relieving the stress by growing our own food, so we're in control of that, plus the actual physical work, plus the knowledge of growing things? Is that what we're meaning by that?
All right. So yes and no.
Okay.
For some people, being in a garden does relieve stress. But again, that would be temporary. The reason the garden is so important is, let's go back to the environmental, you are putting chemicals in your body that are affecting your mood, your health, and is affecting everything. And again, because you can't immediately feel it, you think, oh, it's just food. Or I'm eating and it's good. But that's just not the case. So you have to get better. So that's just not the case. You have to grow your own food to understand that if you don't do that, you're leaking all types of chemicals into your body, and it's just not helping you. So that it gives you a peace of mind to know that one, you have grown safe organic food that has no chemicals in it. It doesn't have any. Where's my camera? It doesn't have any chemicals in it. It doesn't have any anything that's going to affect you ultimately. That's what's happening.
Okay.
So
so go on.
And it also helps with community building. Because when I say everyone grow their own garden, everyone has to do it, not just you. That definitely helps you. That definitely helps you, but when everyone does it, from your last seminar, when you from your first Hidden Color screening at the end, somebody was saying that turn it off and turn it back on. Somebody was saying that why don't we trust each other? Why don't we work with each other? Well, these are the reasons. If we don't do these things together, then we don't grow any trust with each other. So when we have a garden and I get people in the neighborhood to help me build this garden, not only will they get the they will benefit from the garden because you will obviously start sharing this food because you're going to have a surplus of food. So
Yes,
they
I
get the
agree.
benefit.
So
And
it's
then
like
when they have their...
so it's
Go ahead.
like bonding in the community. Plus, you have like a shared interest. So
Exactly.
it's bringing everyone together.
We have to... what it does, it starts changing our value system. In the
Okay.
current system, when we talk about the status quo, what we value is the thing that gives value, which is nothing. We're talking about pound, the US dollar. These are value indicators, but we value the value indicator. Money is a means to an end, but we're so focused on the money itself. So our
So what
value
do you
system
mean
is
by
really
give
messed up.
value?
Huh?
Sorry to cut you. There's a bit of a delay.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by it gives value? Expand on that for me, please.
All right. So in order to talk about the status quo in its entirety, we have to talk about two other concepts: value and authority. We're going to talk about value first because we're right here.
Mm-hmm.
Value is arbitrary. We have to understand fundamentally value is arbitrary. And what I mean by that is that if I give, let's say, what am I thinking? Let's say I have a tractor and I roll up to your house, I roll up to your house with a tractor and says, how much money are you going to give me for this? How much is that tractor worth to you right now?
How much am I going to give you right now
Yeah,
for it?
how much value is a tractor worth to you right now?
Um, well, nothing because I don't have use of a tractor. But if
No, there's no but. No, stop right there.
okay,
Nothing. The tractor is worth nothing to
yeah.
you right now.
Hmm.
So that's because the value has no value to you because you can't do anything with it. You're not interested in it. You live in a city. What am I going to do with this big old tractor? I can barely drive down the street with it to get it anywhere. I got to store it. It would cost me money and energy.
I agree.
So if we take other objects, they're the same thing. Take a car. We have a brand new car. Let's say it's I don't know, just take a car, a modern car. A modern car right now is what, 40,000 pounds?
Yeah,
Or maybe less, something like that.
yeah. So that's a fancy car, but yeah, let's go with that.
Fancy car. Take that same fancy car, go into the future 20 years, how much is that car worth? Is it worth nearly the same amount?
No, I doubt it.
So why did the car has never moved off the lot? It's always been kept clean, so nothing's wrong. It's the exact same car. Why did the value drop?
There's new cars, maybe.
All right, but what's wrong? Why did the value drop?
I don't know.
New cars, yeah, you said there's new cars. Is there any mathematical equation to why the value dropped?
No, I don't think so.
It's arbitrary. There's no the value means nothing. So when I put a 30,000 pound price tag on a car, that it only equals $30,000 if someone is willing to pay $30,000 for it.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. So, like when you're buying houses, so it's only worth that when someone actually buys it for that. Yeah, okay,
Exactly.
I understand. Yes.
So if someone walks up like, this isn't worth 100,000 pounds. Why would I buy this house for 100,000 pounds? You're looking around like, no. But someone else may come in and is like, sold, take it.
Of course.
I want it.
I agree. Okay.
So value is, we have to understand fundamentally that value is arbitrary. Only things that mean something to us is when it means if it has value to us. So when we look at the status quo, the problem is that someone has been coming in and injecting ideas of value to us and saying, if you want to be sexy, you have to do this. If you want to have power and status, you got to drive this type of car. And that's repeated to you over. Why do you think commercials repeat? You can't just say it once. You have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it because that's how you program the subconscious. So now that I have this, I've put in your mind that this thing actually has value. You believe it. But in reality, I need a car to do what? What is the actual function of a car? What is it supposed
A
to
to
do?
B, where I need to
That's
go.
it. Does it matter how I look getting from A to B? As long as I get there without having to worry about not getting to A to B. As long as the car ain't gonna break down on me, and it's not super loud, disturbing other people because your muffler's not working or whatever it is, I get from A to B. That's it. I don't need it for any other reason. But when you take people and they inject these ideas into your mind that, oh, a Lexus is a better car than a Toyota. Well, they're the same company that makes both cars, but one is designed a little bit better, and one has a little bit higher quality parts. But in the end, it gets me from A to B no matter what you say. Well, this will get you from A to B in style. Who cares? Is it worth going into debt trying to lease a car to keep up with the Joneses for getting a Lexus versus getting a Toyota or a Subaru or a Suzuki or whatever other Russian or German-made car there is out there? Is it worth it?
And do you know, I really agree with that point because, you know, our communities, like, I think you're saying the value systems needs to change. And I think in our communities, I think that is one of the top 10 because you always see people from our communities in a very nice car, per se, but they might not have home ownership, they might not have a particularly great job, but the car and the clothes outweigh the income by far, you know, in our community. So I do agree with what you're saying about the value system. And yes, the garden will represent your values because that garden, you can grow things, you can and no one can take that away from you. You know, you
No one.
you don't have to
go.
go to the store.
We gotta stop right there. You just said it right there, and people don't understand how important that is. No one can take it from me, ever.
Of course.
But when you have a car, they can take that car from you. Miss one payment. Watch that tow truck driver find your car.
Exactly. And plus you can carry that knowledge on. You could teach your children, your nieces, your nephews how to grow things, you know, and value that. And, you know, I think that it just brings all other sorts of value systems, like you say, because you can take care of things. You can care it because it takes a lot of nurturing a garden. So, yeah, I think I totally agree with what you're saying. Our value systems need to change. And
so it's one thing. See, here's the problem. When you say we need to change our value system, that doesn't help anybody. Like just because we can philosophically understand that, then all right. But that's why I say grow a garden. Because in the act of growing a garden, your value system will change by itself. I don't need to try to preach it to you because I don't like preaching to people what they should and shouldn't do. I'm saying if you want change, one of my highly recommended first steps is to grow a garden. Because when you have kids, or if you already have kids, you teach them values through the garden. Here's where you here's where you sleep and lay your head. Here's where you grow your food. And when you know where your food comes from, you don't have to worry about putting your trust into something that you don't know. You don't know these companies. All their marketing and advertising doesn't mean anything. Because, oh, we have the highest quality food and they're hand-picked. And no, they're not. That's just a commercial. We know when we see a factory, stuff just flying through machines and going into bags and all types of things happening. No one cares.
Of course,
and then what else is going into those bags? How is that food grown? I have so many questions that you have to ask somebody, and why trusting someone takes energy. So can I trust the manufacturers of the people making the food that I put into my body that helps me function on my daily life? Or will this food eventually cause cancer or increase my chances of whatever type of health issues that are common amongst my people? That's too stressful. When I grow up myself, I know where it came from. I know what went into it. And when I eat it, it tastes even better because it's my hard work. It's the fruits of my labor, literally.
Yes.
So there it teaches all types of values. And then when you have that system of a community that grows its own food, you are now circulating value, or I want to say money, in this system. You're circulating money. So now when people talk about Black Wall Street, but they don't practice anything, they just want to preach Black Wall Street. We need to do it. Group economics. Stop talking about it. Here's how you start group economics that is actually a benefit to us. Because in starting businesses, a business in and of itself is useless. It's valueless. It doesn't help us. But when we have a business that helps us grow our own food, that's very different. So when people give very vague solutions talking about group economics of what? That doesn't mean anything. We need to grow. I suggest we grow our own food because, one, it's been proven already. It works. It's not a theory. It's not some. I'm not regurgitating what other people are saying. I'm a permaculture consultant. And from facts, I can tell you that it works. When you base your value system on modern, I don't want to say modern techniques, it's traditional agriculture, you will improve the health and the livelihood of everyone in your community very quickly. But
have you got any examples of where this has worked before?
Oh yeah.
Maybe, okay, great. Yeah.
Easy. I said it in the first one. The lowest plateau in China. That was like 100 kilometers or so many square. It was a very large space in China. The place was in disservice, means it had a negative effect on the environment. And it took 3 years, but in 3 years, everything got better. The health of the people improved overall. Everyone's health went up. The economic status of everybody has gone up. The area has gone. Everything overall has gone up. Now you have to fight those people to help them, but that's where ego and tradition come in, and they start slowing us down and getting things done. But it's a wonderful place. It's a lot better place than it was before because now everyone can survive just fine. Where before they were doing old techniques that were just destroying the land, but it's all they knew and they wouldn't let go of it. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing now. All we know is the status quo, and so we're just holding on to this idea that no, we got to get the house to get the car, or we have to. What was another one that was said in Hidden Colors? Buy land and buy houses and put houses on the land and rent those out. That doesn't help us. As good as it sounds, it doesn't help us. It doesn't change the value system.
Will do.
Huh?
What sort of things will do? Like, say, in that community, do you know what they did to, what type of things? They had their garden, and then do you know what else they did to improve?
That does it all by itself. When you do that, when there are 6 countries in Africa, so there are small countries around the world, a lot of them in Africa, that have done this where they have, I'm trying to remember the names of them, but basically the people went from, you've seen the traditional, the way that they show Africa, people barefoot with bottles of water on their head and just dirt everywhere, nothing.
Yes.
Take that and turn it into a thriving garden almost. That's what it's turned into. And now the place went from we have nothing to now, and you can't take pictures in these places because they sold the photo rights to certain companies, so only these companies can come in and take pictures of this village to use in magazines or use in whatever, because the place is beautiful now. Okay. So does it take a couple of years? Yes. It does take a couple of years, but you're talking about a couple of years for the rest of your life and every generation from that. So if you're not willing to put in a couple of years of work, and really the work is in the plants just growing to maturity. You just got to maintain them, and during that maturity, that growth into maturity, you're still eating and benefiting from it. So it doesn't take that much work, but if you're not willing to do that, I can't help you.
No, it sounds excellent. It sounds very encouraging, especially to hear that other communities have done this and was able to develop. So that would be excellent if we could incorporate that into our lifestyles and get a garden.
It's so easy, and that's why it's the first step. It's like grow a garden. If you have the space, start growing food. And then with that food, now you asked earlier, what should we grow in that garden? Well, that's pretty, really anything that will grow in your region is going to be the best thing. Because you have to have food that will survive, that's very tolerant to your environment. And once you get that out the way, go crazy. The 20 species of plants should be good for you. And no, it's not just tomatoes, potatoes, and like the basic stuff. I mean, that is such a narrow amount of vegetables. I mean, there's so many vegetables to grow and explore. And if you're growing some and I'm growing a different kind, and we can swap instead of me growing tomatoes and potatoes and you growing tomatoes and potatoes and everyone around us growing tomatoes, and then we just like there's nothing there. You need the best thing to grow is the highest variety of food that you can fit in any space.
Okay, definitely. No, that's great to hear. So I think, so I just want to round up that what we spoke about, that values can change if we are able to learn to grow things and it will bring our communities together. You'll be able to bond, share things. So yes, I think that's an excellent idea, and it's an excellent point that I think would be a help to a lot of us. So yeah, but Kurt, I did want to bring things back and maybe a little bit of a darker side, because
what do you mean by that?
yeah, I know. I'm going to go dark to the dark side. So I did want to talk about in our community things like gambling, drugs, and because I read somewhere that people do turn to these things from stress, and they're trying to compensate. I don't know, maybe the chemicals in their bodies by taking drugs or expressing themselves in this way. Did you have anything more about that?
That's one of stress. See, drugs and alcohol or addiction is a coping mechanism for stress. And so again, if we eliminate the stress or reduce it greatly, you will immediately reduce the alcoholism, the stress, the crackheads as we call them. All that will be reduced very quickly because it's trying to get to the status quo that causes that problem. So think about it. You're telling me as a man, I have no value if I don't have a certain career, if I don't drive a certain car. And my subconscious has been programmed to say that you're not valuable unless you do these things, but no matter how you try, you just can't get it, whether it's through lack of education or whatever it may be. But you're ultimately telling human beings you mean nothing unless you have these things. And so what people do, that causes stress because through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as we talked about last time, there's a sense of wanting to belong. Mm-hmm. And if the group that you want to belong to or the group that you would easily identify with rejects you because of that, because you don't have a certain status, I mean, what else would you do? You're going to turn to alcoholism. You're going to turn to something that's going to be addictive. So you may start smoking weed and say, oh, I'm just trying to. No, weed smoking is a form of addiction. Regardless of what anyone says or wants to argue about it, from a chemical standpoint, you are addicted to it because you are addicted to coping with your stress. When you eliminate stress, I'm not talking about almost eliminate it. It can be done. All these things you need to cope with stress will disappear. You don't need them anymore. So when we talk about, we can attack, when we talk about everyone extracting from the black community, you have people that come in and build liquor stores like crazy in the black community. Well, it makes good business sense. It's not nothing personal. It's business. If you guys are all the addicts and what you're addicted to is alcohol, well, guess what? I'm going to open up an alcohol shop. I'm going to open up a corner store where you can come and get alcohol from me because I'm going to make a lot of money here. Why do you think corner stores do not work in prevalent communities? The people are not downtrodden and beat and stressed to a high degree. They're still in the same struggle as me and you. They're just struggling at a higher pace. So they struggle up here. But trust me, they lose 1 or 2 paychecks to be right down here with us.
Of course, yes.
But because they're comfortable, they're happy slaves. That's the best way to put it. They're happy slaves up here. And they can ignore everything around them because they're happy slaves. But we hear about their fall from grace because usually that fall includes them jumping off a building too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yes. So, what do you mean by happy slaves per se?
Well, as a happy slave, you are fighting this. You're trying to meet. You somewhat met the status quo, right? You have the career, you have the car, you have the house. Everything is good, But what you fail to realize is that you must constantly now keep running in this rat race. If you ever stop, ever, straight down you go. Because remember, when your income goes up, your expenses go right up with them.
Of course.
Because most people are not financially educated. But if I had, let's say I'm where I am now, and I got a better job, and my money goes up, but I keep my expenses here, now you're starting to build wealth. But most people go right on up. I get more money, I got to get a bigger car and get a bigger house and get more expensive things and do more elaborate things. Most people do that. Not everyone, but most people, from a lack of financial education, that is the standard path they take.
So one of the solutions would be, you know, as you're coming up, like you was talking about the expenses. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
About expenses?
Yeah, like instead of, you were saying, instead of, you know, as the usual person, as they continue, they get bigger expenses. So like a bigger house. So what do you think would help us to avoid that situation?
No, the same thing. When we change our value system, we would no longer value a bigger house. Because let's say you have a family with one child. That means you probably need a single family home. Or that is the assumption that you would need a single family home. Because how much space does a child need?
Yeah, not that much. I don't say. Yeah, there's lots of parks, I suppose.
So where does the idea come in that I must upgrade to a single family home, or that I must at least get a bigger apartment? Where does the idea come from? Because I remember growing up, I guess our house wasn't, when I go back, I used to live in Miami, so I remember going back and looking at the house we grew up in, and it was so tiny. It was the tiniest house, and I was like, I thought our house was huge. But obviously I'm looking as a little kid. So when I go back and I just kind of go down the street and look at the house, like, this was it? This is what we grew up in?
Yeah.
I couldn't comprehend the size difference. Obviously there's years difference, but how much space does a little kid need to grow up? And I have two brothers. So how much space do we need? We don't need, look at the kids in Africa. I mean, they grow up in shacks, literal shacks. In Jamaica, they have shacks they grow up in with a tiny old yard. How much space do children need? But that's the status quo, saying, oh, you have a house. And the real, man, I'm a part of, I deal with a thing called here, it's all over the world, it's called BNI, Business Network International. There we go, Business Network International. And BNI groups start everywhere. The thing that runs BNI is real estate. And so you have all the real estate developers say, hey, if you know anyone who's just having a family that needs to grow to a bigger home, well, wait. How can you market to someone that says, oh, you have a child, you need to get a bigger home now? Where does that idea come from? Marketing. Real estate people say, oh, you have a child, you need more space, obviously. Buy this home. Why do I need to buy a home? The apartment I'm in works just fine, or wherever you're staying, because children don't need that much space. So so all these ideas are projected to us, and that's the danger, is that we don't know where ideas come from. And so if we change our value system, we start growing our own food. It's like, okay, you have a child on the way now. Do I really need to get a bigger house? Because how much space does a child need? Does a child have to have its own room that you have to put it in a crate? And if we always talk about Africa and our ancestors. Do you think people in Africa had separate rooms for their children? Like, really? You see the women strap their kids to them. Where do you think they sleep at night? Oh, there's my baby, there's me. But
so how do we filter out those ideas that are pushing us? So we want to have ideas that are going to make us successful, but at the same time, we don't want to have those ideas that are going to push us into,
you just did it. You realize it. You just didn't realize it. You said we need to have ideas that make us successful.
Mm-hmm.
What is success?
Okay, that might be, it's quite subjective. It might be different to other people.
You didn't say it as it was subjective. You said it as it was a predefined thing. And therein lies the idea. Where does this idea of success? You're successful if you have the house, you have the car, and you have the wife and 2.5 kids. There's your success.
Yeah, that is the usual, yeah. Definitely, I agree. That's
what
what everyone aspires to.
That's the problem. We need to get away from that idea. And we need to. Well, that's why changing your value system is so important. Because there is no success. Because ultimately, what we got to understand is that I owe society nothing. I don't owe society anything. Society benefits from me being alive. I don't have to contribute to the society in any way. I don't have to do any of that stuff.
So how do we get away from those ideas? How do we move away from that?
Well, step one is grow the garden. Step two is build your own home.
Okay.
Because it goes back to what you said earlier. No one can take it from you. So think about it like this. Right now, you probably live in an apartment or a home, right? You're going to live in one of the two, ultimately. Unless you live with somebody else, they still live in an apartment or a home, correct?
Yes.
All right. So if you, assuming you're paying rent or mortgage, if you no longer have to pay rent or mortgage, how would that affect your life?
Oh my goodness, I'd be loaded. I'd have a lot of,
So think about all the little projects that you want to do that you could do now.
Yes.
Do you need to, people make it seem like businesses are innovative. People are innovative, not businesses. And a business is started by a person who has an idea. And they need to get more people and they need to sell it. That's the problem. And for the idea to take shape, someone needs to be interested. I have to convince people that this product is important. But there lies another problem. I have to take resources and convince people, and I have to make enough of these things, these widgets, to make it a viable idea. But if let's say I don't have to pay rent, I don't have a mortgage, I'm going to sit around and do my little tiny projects all day.
Of course.
They're like, oh, now I can work on this electronic project. Now I can work on this, and I can sit around and improve it. And so will we still have our cell phones? Will we still have our cameras? Of course. We still have them. Because I have time now to just do what I want. So when you think about our ancestors and how great they were, do you think they were paying mortgage and rent?
Yeah.
When they came up with all these great things? No, they did it because they could do it. Now, some of them, there was some type of system in place, but people had their land, and they said, hey, I need to find a better way to grow this food or do something. And they start tinkering. And then we keep evolving. We have innovations and more innovations. And people keep finding, and they collaborate with each other and say, hey, someone over here did this. I have this thing. These may work together. And then more innovations come and more innovations. I don't need work to innovate.
Yeah, I agree. And you see your point. I'm really taking from other cultures how they have done exactly what you're saying. Say the Irish community, they have land and they pass it on from generation to generation, and each person builds their own house on the land. So yeah, so they probably have a lot more, income per se, or cash flow to do things that they like to do. Also the Asian communities, I worked with a lady and she said they all lived in a house together, they all rented a room, and everyone was saving to get their own home, and ultimately no one could leave until everyone had enough money for their own home. So everyone was encouraged to help each other to be successful. So I totally get the point that you're making. Yes.
So if we get away, see what happens is we complain about individualism and things like that. So let's go back to stress for a second. What are the other side effects of stress to why we don't help each other and why we don't, ultimately why we don't help each other, trust each other? Is stress inhibits your ability to feel compassion and to empathize with other people.
I suppose it's shutting down, like you say, the things you don't need.
So when you see your fellow man, I think about all the times you're walking through London and you may see someone begging for money. Now, granted, there's a whole thing like they could be really begging for money or they could just be out there and go to get some more alcohol. You don't know. But that's not really the point. The point is, do you just block them out of your mind? You don't even see them. No empathy. Yeah. Not that you have to give it to them, but I'm talking about the blocking. They're just not there. I don't see that. And when you see someone who really needs help, nah, not my issue. I got to pay my own rent. I got to do this. If I feed you, I'm going to be homeless. We're going to be out here together. And And, you know, that's a viable thought.
But yeah, that really does link it back to our, say, the black communities, because, you know, it's a general term that we don't sit together or we don't necessarily work together to a common goal. So that makes a lot of sense that we would be under a lot of stress, so that the empathy is not there to do that. So
Exactly.
is there anything specific that we could do to combat that?
Well, that's what the gardening is about. We have to, everyone's trying, ultimately, everyone is wrong about everything black, is what I'm saying. It's because everyone's talking about handling the symptoms of stress and not stress directly. And stress is stress, but stress is caused by something outside of you. So the only thing outside of us that is causing these stresses is the status quo of modern society we live in. So we can still live in the society, but not be stressed by the society. And that's through growing your own food and building your own home. Once you eliminate those two things, no one can tell you what you can and can't do. You kind of have that Michael Jackson effect. Michael Jackson has so much money, he can do whatever he wanted. I could care less what you think about me. Oh, you don't like my hair? Guess what? Go find someone else to work for you. I don't care. I'm not perming my hair. I'm not wearing a wig for you because I'm desirable. Because I now have the time to develop myself. I can go home and I can practice something for hours because you can't take my home from me. And I grow my own food, so I eat well, so I can think. Well, whoever else you're hiring is likely stressed, is desperate for the job. I'm not desperate for the job. So screw you and your job. Matter of fact, I'm just going to work on my own stuff. I don't need your job. I'm only here because I want to be here. So would you rather someone who wants to be at your job or someone who's desperately seeking work?
Of course. No, that sounds amazing. That is a great solution, and I can see where we are now and where we need to go, the path on what you've said. So I think that would be amazing.
And so yeah, the goal is to eliminate stress by any means necessary. And the two main ways to do that, because you have to transition into that lifestyle. It can't be done right away. If you had about, let's say, $10,000 sitting around somewhere, you could do it very quickly. You know, if you want to build your, I like container homes. They're very quick. You can drop a container somewhere that costs about maybe in 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds. You can get a container, drop it somewhere, build out the inside to look like a modern home. The outside may not look that modern, but you can design that to look great too. You're talking about 20,000 pounds. I have a home. How much I can pay back $20,000 in no time, especially if I have no mortgage.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm paying it back in 2 or 3 years if I take my time.
So we were saying about the stress and making black people selfish. So can I make a generalization? Are black people selfish?
Are black people selfish?
Yes.
Well, what do you mean by that? It's selfish in what way?
We're saying stress, Lisa, the empathy shutting down. You know, so I'm saying in our community, is that prevalent? Is that the common theme?
Well, see the first issue, we have a linguistic issue here. Selfish has a negative connotation, but everyone is selfish. That just means I'm doing something for myself. When I eat, I'm being selfish technically. I'm not eating for anyone else. So I'm guessing, obviously, you mean it in a way that is like I'm doing something despite trying to help others. And so when I say we're selfish, and I would say no. Because when you understand stress and how it affects people, you understand that we lack compassion for empathy, which causes this ripple effect. And so people will say, we don't help each other. That's the main problem. Wrong. You're wrong. I don't like using the term wrong, but I have to say it now. People are wrong when they say that about us. It's not that we don't like helping people. We don't have the capacity to help anybody.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense when you say that, definitely.
Now we can empathize with each other more because we're realizing that we're really, really stressed out. And now that I understand the physiological side of stress that it literally incapacitates my ability to feel compassion, I can now be more compassionate about that and understand that we are really struggling here, and that we can't even recognize our fellow human beings and their needs. And we talk about a community, but it's hard to grow a community when I cannot empathize with my fellow community member.
Yeah.
So then we have to say, we got to fix this.
We definitely do. So are other cultures as stressed as us, or is it a different type of stresses?
Now, what I did look up, you know, if we want to make a claim about black people, we have to look at the world. At least that's my standard. I have to look at the world and look at the similar problems across the world. Everyone in the world has these problems. Everyone in a modern society, has these same problems we do. The problem we have is that it's exacerbated. And so the reason is, why do we have it to a higher degree than everyone else? And as we said in the previous webinars, it's post-slave black that has these problems.
Okay.
When you don't find post-slave black, you don't have these issues. Because Africans, they have their issues, but not to the same degree that us in the Western world and in Europe and America, namely, have these issues. It's very different. Chinese people have these issues. Indian people have everyone has these issues. It's just that every culture is slightly different, but when you just look at the data, everyone has these issues. It's just when you see the data, it goes like this, and then you hit black people, it goes, and it skyrockets.
Yes.
And everyone has. There's no civilization, modern civilization, that does not have the issues we have. So we have to be very clear of that. But the only thing difference between us and everybody else is post-slavery.
Okay, so we're starting from probably zero compared to other cultures, possibly. Is that what you're saying, from the post-traumatic syndrome from slavery?
Glad you said that. Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Because you have post-traumatic syndrome, post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Okay.
Which is supposed to be a form of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, that the lady who is perpetuating the idea of that is the lady who created it. And her name is Dr. Joyce McGrail or something like that. It's Joyce, something like that. It's one lady the idea comes from. And I listened to her talk, and I was trying to hear what she was trying to talk about to understand this concept of post-traumatic slave syndrome or disorder. Ultimately, it's a bunch of bollocks. The lady makes a big jump in logic. I can follow her. She has a doctorate, but that doesn't mean anything to me. She makes a big leap in logic, and that's where her problem lies right here. She goes from here, is logical, and then she jumps, and then she continues her story. But we can't disregard this chasm jump she made.
Okay, tell me about the chasm. What do you mean by the
chasm jump? She said was it's a thing in critical thinking where when you're making a flaw in logic when you jump to the extraordinary before considering something more ordinary, something more likely to happen. So what she says is that post-traumatic slave syndrome is basically saying we inherit trauma from slavery, right?
Yes. So
what she's trying to say is that you have every generation of these people have been traumatized. Okay, I can follow that. And every generation there's a trauma from that until you come out of slavery. But the people who were traumatized never got treatment, never got talked to. There was no psychiatric help or anything for that. So they're carrying that trauma. Okay, I can follow that. Then she gets to the point where it's saying, because they were never treated, and she's saying that as a child you see your parents who are damaged, and you now take on that trauma, and that's where that's where I had stopped with her, because she made a huge jump there, and to continue with the thought process that it's we're suffering PTSD. To say that we're suffering PTSD shows that you don't understand PTSD. PTSD, she defined it, and from its definition is when you suffer trauma dramatically or directly or indirectly that causes major trauma. And it has a bunch of symptoms that go along with it. So what she did was just basically say, here's the symptoms of PTSD, here's the symptoms that black people suffer. Oh, we have PTSD. It don't work like that. You're not a medical doctor. You wrote a dissertation on your theory, but you're not a medical doctor. She said she did interviews and things like that. I don't know what that says, but that's a big jump. And because my brother is a doctor and I talk to quite a few doctors, that's not how you diagnose things. The problem being, you can line up symptoms all day. The problem is that there are multiple things that could show you the same exact symptoms. And the only way to rule them out is to test them. If you do not test them, then you can't say it's this other thing just because they line up.
Okay.
And therein lies her problem. That's when she made the chasm jump. And because
okay, so are we saying there's no PTSD at all in the community? Because, you know, we have to, you know, I have done some reading about it. I do know a little bit. You know, obviously the slave trade, that happened for 400 years. We had the Willie Lynch syndrome, you know, where
here's how I destroy that in one thing. Here's how I destroy it. I can disprove it very easily. You have a child that grows up. Very easily. If you have a child that grows up and you never introduce the idea of slavery to them, and this child grows up in a well-off family, where's the trauma?
You know, but that's not necessarily for families that have ancestors from slavery. I wouldn't, I'm making a generalization, I must say, but I wouldn't say that's the status quo. You know, usually people that have ancestors from slavery are usually on low incomes or...
No, but I'm saying here's how you destroy it, because in order to prove your theory, it must be able to be verified and falsified. So if I can falsify your theory, that means it's ultimately wrong. But if there's no way for me to falsify it, it is not a theory because it cannot be falsified. Both components must be there. And I can falsify it very easily. So this means she can throw it out, which is when you have a family that grows up and you do not introduce the idea of slavery to them, the family isn't destroyed and had these traumas. The wife, the mother, is very normal functioning. Maybe she came up, her family came up and had good money, so they came up with good money. But they're directly descended from slaves. Let's make them directly descended. Where is the trauma in that family if the child never perceived slavery on that level? Where's the trauma? So what you're ultimately doing is making an excuse for black people.
You know, I'm really going to have to disagree with you on this point. I really am, because you know, I've seen, I've done some reading on this, and you know, there's people that
let's go here. What do you disagree with specifically?
I disagree that a person that generations of people that endures so much trauma, per se, 400 years. Are going to come out of that and just, you know, start as everyone else.
Okay, here's a prime example I can destroy that idea.
And I can see that from my community, you know.
No, you're making what's called a jump in logic.
Okay.
I'm talking about one thing specifically, and you're actually talking about something slightly different. So you're not disagreeing with what I'm saying necessarily more than you're talking about something else than I'm talking about.
Okay, let's try and get on the same path then, yeah?
Let's go on the same path. Let's take the Jewish community.
Yeah.
They were thrown in ovens. For quite some time, they were thrown in ovens. Why are they suffering like we are?
I don't know how long. I don't think it was 400 years. I know.
No, let's stop. Let's stop there. Does it take repeated trauma to equal post-traumatic slave syndrome, or are you talking about a major trauma of slavery, period? So how do you quantify the number of generations needed to say that I have to experience a major trauma for X amount of generations for it to pass on to the next generation? Where's the formula then for that?
I don't know if there is a formula, but I don't know if any other culture that has happened to. I don't think any other culture has happened for generations like that. So there's nothing to check it against.
But this is where the flaw in logic is. If I cannot falsify your theory, then it also cannot be verified. This is basic critical thinking. So we know that Jews were thrown in ovens. That's very traumatic, period. There's no arguing with the trauma of being thrown in ovens. We agree on that point, right?
Definitely, yes.
All right. So how many generations of oven throwing do I need for us to come out of oven? How many generations of being thrown in the oven do I need to experience post-traumatic slave syndrome or post-traumatic syndrome of that type? And if you can't give me a formula, then how can you say that it takes so many generations in order to achieve this when I have one generation that went through it? Both are recorded. One happened longer. We both agree to that. But how much longer is longer?
Yeah, but there are other
cultures. What about the Chinese? They had slaves, not a lot of slaves. So how much trauma is trauma?
Okay, go. Tell me about what you were saying. Chinese had slaves. So
how do you think the Great Wall was built?
So their slaves were they from Africa or what?
No, I'm talking about Chinese slaves of their own people.
Oh, of their own people. You know, I think that is, you see, I think with the slave trade in general, there is so many variables that I think it's very hard to compare it because, one, we went to a different
wait. Now you're going into details. You're going into details. We're talking about trauma. How much trauma? I'm only talking about trauma. How much trauma does it take? And how long must that trauma persist before it is trapped? You know, we're not talking about ripping someone from their land and putting them somewhere else. I understand that that is very unique to us. I understand that. What I'm referring to is the idea that we are suffering from some type of metaphysical transfer of post-traumatic syndrome, because you said the definition is taken out of context when she talks about post-traumatic stress disorder. You experience trauma directly or indirectly. So directly means it happened to me. I experienced the trauma firsthand. Indirectly refers to me seeing it. I saw a man get shot. I saw a car accident. I experienced it indirectly. It wasn't directly to me, it was indirect. When did you or anyone else in the current generation ever experience slavery? Not the symptoms of slavery, slavery itself. This is where the logic starts to fall apart. I'm not arguing about the devastation.
Okay, tell me what the symptoms of slavery are. What do you mean?
You mentioned before the Willie Lynch letter, the destruction of the family, but that can be disproven also. Because we talk about the destruction of the family, that was only in the last 100 years. That's when, because when you look before 1920s and 30s, the black family was together. So we're jumping over facts that are clearly there to make a point. So we're ignoring that which disproves our theory instead of trying to prove the theory. So when you say the black family is destroyed, well, when did that start? So that means right out of slavery, it should have been destroyed. That's not true. Yes, we were ripped from one, and slaves and sisters and brothers were sold. Yes, I get that. I agree with that. But the black family was still together at a certain point. It wasn't until more recent years when they started breaking apart. So is that from slavery, or is that from something else where that divide started? The black family has been together. There's evidence of that. There's plenty of evidence of it. So why is that evidence being ignored is my question. It's only being ignored.
What evidence? So that you said there's more evidence to show, you know, that the black family was broken up later.
All right. And Black Wall Street, the thing that everyone wants to talk about all the time. Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street, you tell me there were no families in Black Wall Street? That we had a 70% baby mama rate ultimately in Black Wall Street? No, there were families whole and intact and doing very well together. So why is that being ignored? Before that, even before that period, the families had to be together to get to that point. So why is that being ignored? So where was the post-traumatic slave syndrome how could Black Wall Street even exist if that was true? Why are we ignoring these major facts? There's too many gaps in logic is what I'm saying. So I'm saying that post-traumatic slave syndrome in and of itself is flawed as a concept. I'm not arguing about slavery and the effects of it on us. I'm saying that as a reason is flawed when you look at it logically, because she's trying to diagnose something. That means it's like diagnosing depression. Depression has certain symptoms. There are certain things that go along with it and it causes certain things. But depression also looks like many other things. And until you test it, you cannot say it's depression right away. This is why it's dangerous for anyone who's a layman to diagnose other people. You have a friend, you see a lump on your chest, oh, I got cancer. No, this is not how it works. Just because you have a lump somewhere, there are more ways you have to test things. And her theory is not testable, for one. She's just showing, here's what Black people do and how we act. Here's post-traumatic stress syndrome. There are the symptoms together. That's it. So I don't want to dwell on and on about this. It is related to health, but the point is that it's flawed logically when you have enough understanding about how diagnosis works, how the body works, how psychology works, and how I have an understanding of all these things. So when I hear what she's saying, from just a critical thinking standpoint, I don't even need to have other things. From a critical standpoint, it does not follow enough logic and diagnoses to be considered a valid thing. It has too many flaws in it. And when she can fill in those gaps, I'm with her. But until then, there's way too many gaps that she jumps over to try to make her thing fit, which ultimately is only giving us excuses to say, oh, we suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome, so we can't make it. No, we don't need more things against us.
I'm getting the feeling that you're feeling like people have given that to us like an excuse for probably not doing as well.
No, I'm not saying that people have given it to us, because people haven't given it to us. Only she has given it. She's come up with a concept, and certain people are going to grab onto that concept and use. Because I heard it was a Black Lives Matter video I watched, and this girl said, "Well, we suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome." I said, "What? What is she talking about?" And that's like, so now people will take that and use it. Enables people. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally understand. I totally understand that. I agree totally. You know, it has to be used in the right context. You know, we're not going to deny that slavery has had a massive effect on people that are the ancestors from slavery. You know, whatever you'd want to call it, PTSD or something else. You know, we are still reaping the effects of what happened for 400 years. So, you know, whatever you'd like to call it. But yeah, no, it's not good to use it in that context of saying an excuse like, oh, we're suffering from this, don't, you know, approach us about this or that. You know, no, I don't advocate that at all.
Well, let's bring it back to stress, because it still relates directly to stress. And another part of stress, one of the things of being a high functioning mammal is that we can create our own stress from thin air, actually. So most stress is from an external stimulus affecting us. But because of our brain, the strength of our mind, we can create our own stress. Because remember, in our previous webinar, we talked about how the mind cannot tell the difference between a vivid imagination and real life. That's why when you sleep, you start punching and kicking and doing all types of things when you're sleeping. It's because the mind cannot tell the difference. So when you start introducing certain ideas to people, you create your own stress. So when you think white supremacy, you're literally creating your own stress, so which means you're literally killing yourself. So does white supremacy exist? Yes, it exists. Does it affect you? To what degree? And how much? And to what degree are you allowing it to affect you? Because if the theory of white supremacy was so strong and prevalent, not saying it doesn't exist, make sure we're very clear on that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying it doesn't affect us to the degree in which we make it out to.
Okay.
If that was the case,
positive.
huh?
I said that sounds very positive, you know, to think,
Yeah.
because some people do hold on to it and say, oh well, we've been held back, and you know they might, in like you say, be imagining it's holding them back more, you know,
That's
so it
all
may
that's
be like
happening.
a confidence thing.
That's all that's happening. If that was the case, I would have never been able to start up businesses from zero that go on to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Hmm.
It would have been impossible for me to do that.
Okay, so
So
I think I'm understanding you a bit better. I think you're saying don't dwell on that, like you know, even
that's
if
all
that
I'm
is,
saying. You got it.
yeah,
It's saying,
okay,
yes, it's there. Put it over there. Who cares?
okay,
Who
definitely,
cares?
I
We
agree
have to move
totally with that.
forward. At
Yeah,
what time are we going
yeah.
to move forward? Stop looking back and making excuses.
I agree. You
We
can't
gotta
move
move
forward if you're looking back all the time. I
That's
totally, yes.
all I'm saying. So
Hmm.
does it exist? Yeah, it exists. To what degree? Is it a
Hmm.
significant degree? Not really. If it is to you, you're creating that problem in your head and you're creating your own stress. And
Okay.
I would go even as far to say this. Any person who introduces the idea of white supremacy to children should be arrested for child abuse.
Yeah. Do
The
you know
reason
what?
I
I've got a
say
really
that,
funny story
go ahead.
behind that, because I went to a predominantly European school,
Mhm.
and you know, I knew a little bit about slavery. You know, it was just a word, you know, slavery. And then I was the only black girl in my class, so it was in school. It was in history class. They're going to do slavery. I was like, oh, okay, you know, this might be related to me in some way. Going to class. Oh my goodness. I was absolutely mortified. They had pictures of people in chains, and, you know, I was just mortified because I knew about it, but I didn't know to that extent. So to see
Exactly.
that and be exposed to that in class in front of all these people that are not even particularly like me, you know, they're my friends and everything, but, you know, they're a different culture. I was totally embarrassed. I remember just feeling about this big in my class that I just didn't want to be there. So yeah, I totally get that you can introduce it to people when you don't really have that concept. Yeah.
Yeah, it's see the thing. There's stress has another effect on children, and this
Hmm.
is why I say that. When you understand how stress affects children, it for one of the issues with stress on children that they grow up too quickly,
Hmm.
and when they grow up too quickly, that has enough of rippling effects behind it. But you also start the downward spiral of their health because stress has a direct physical effect on the body.
Okay.
So it's almost like you take away from them that youth that people like to talk about, that young and vigor, you take it away from them. So yes, the body, they're physically full of energy and things like that, but that does not stop the internal damage that starts at a young age. So when
Hmm.
you see people getting diabetes and hypertension and all this other stuff at an early age, and people having heart attacks at 40, and you're like, wow, he's so young. How do you get a heart attack so early? Well, guess what? The problem started at a very young age when
Okay.
ideas were introduced to them, because ideas are dangerous to the
Definitely.
body. Also, in general, when you plant an idea. So when they walk around thinking, oh, white people are angry, think about if you saw Roots. After you saw Roots, Django, or any of these movies about black people and slavery, did you walk out of that theater thinking, oh, white people are just fine? Or were you
No,
angry?
you're angry. You're coming out. You feel a bit upset. Like, wow. Even though you kind of have an idea about what happened, when you actually see how horrible things were, you feel so upset. You think, I can't believe, you know, people have been treated like this, and especially people that you could possibly have been related to. You know, yeah, it's horrible.
Do you think that's not affecting you? Because you
Yeah,
can't
of
feel
course.
the
It must
immediate
do.
effects of it. So stress is a major, major, major component to why we are so downbeaten. So when we allow the idea of post-traumatic slave syndrome into our minds, she just enabled us to have more stress because we created another excuse that seemingly is medical in nature.
Hmm.
But it's not. She's not that type of doctor. We
Yeah.
saw from Hidden Colors 4 in the first seminar that when you have doctor in front of your name, it is very misleading, and you should really be thrown in jail to a degree or hit with some type of fines and fees. That when you call yourself a doctor and you do not disclose what type of doctor you are. If you're a medical
Yeah.
doctor, that's very different. Then say you're a medical doctor. MD is behind your name. So I know you're a medical doctor. But if you're a doctor of hip hop or a doctor of whatever people will give you a doctorate for, that has nothing to do with medicine, but you're talking about a medical term or something in medicine, you should be, they should charge you in court for misrepresentation. It should just be that.
Yeah.
So if
Everyone should be transparent. We should know exactly what your you know, because some people are self-taught. I think there's nothing wrong with that. You could learn from a
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if you present yourself as a
I just
doctor,
think it should be transparent. So if you are that and you are a doctor in that way, you should let everyone know, because obviously, you know, you don't want to give anyone the chance to say something bad about you, you know, when you probably didn't intend that. So yeah, I totally agree. That is definitely very important. Yes.
So stress plays a major role in everything, and if we don't focus on the stress, we'll never get out of what we're trying to get. That's why we look at the solutions from Hidden Colors 4, right? They gave a bunch of solutions we talked about. That we talked about in the very first seminar, and why they were really, we discussed ad nauseum why they're not solutions or non-solutions. But let's look at them and talk about why there's an assumption being made about this, and this is where the problem comes in. There's an assumption about when you offer a solution, when you offer a solution, you're assuming the problem, and no one has ever defined the problem in the black community. They always point to one thing and generally say that's the problem. We don't trust each other. That's the problem. We don't buy from each other's businesses. That's the problem. And the problem with that is that, let's say we solve that. If I can still say then what, that's not really a solution. So let's look at. I got some slides here. So let's go quickly over the what they were talking about.
Okay.
So
yes.
If we look at militant solutions, first they said protect yourself, protect the nation. But here's the problem with militant solutions. When you go into war, a war mindset, that is very stressful. So this solution would only exacerbate the stress problems we have. It's not a good solution at all. Military mindset and all this other stupid stuff that was being said, that is stressful. If you've ever been in a fight or you've ever been thinking about how to plot against somebody, anyone can agree that that is stressful. It's not something I go home like, oh yeah, let me think about how I'm going to destroy somebody today. That's just such a pleasant thought. That is very stressful. So these things that they gave us were just idiotic. And so then they had these other ones. I guess we got to pull them up. They weren't organized properly. So let's get the next slides pulled up. So a lot of these things that they gave were just not good. Ultimately, is that they're not good. And the reason they're not good, is hold up, we got to get some production going on over here. There we go. The reason they're not good is because they don't solve the core issue of stress.
Okay.
They're only approaching the symptoms of stress. And the same thing, we're treating the problem, we're not curing the problem. But in order to cure the problem, we have to change our value system. Now, let's talk about authority for a second while we're getting this other slide pulled up. I said there are two issues. So you have the stress itself, value, which we have to change our value system, but we must understand value to understand what that means, and then authority.
Mm-hmm.
As we said in the rights webinar, we have the right to be here and do what we need to do. And no one can tell us otherwise because no one really has the power to do so. But where does power come from? Do you know where power comes from?
Like just my opinion of what I know.
Yeah, where does power come from?
Where does it come from? Gosh, do you know what? That is such a funny question. It's not coming to me to the top of my head straight away. It's just something that you know. That person's in charge. That's the power. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Where does the power come from? Why are they in charge?
Usually because someone tells you, which sounds very, very basic. But yeah, that's.
Well, that's And see, here lies the problem. We don't understand power, and we think it's assumed like, oh yeah, they said they were in power, so they're in power, so I'm just going to believe that this person is in power. This is not how it works. Power is granted by you. You give power. All power from anyone else comes from somebody else. That's it. No one is inherently born with power.
Okay.
Now, the reason this is, think about it, in a modern society, we're talking about modern times, not back in the day with kings, when people had big mobs that could say I'm in power because they were forcing things on you.
Uh-huh.
If how do I say this? When you are, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Then when you have to understand power. Power comes from the government says it the government says it very clearly, because everyone thinks, a lot of people think the government is in power, but the government will say clearly we can only govern by the consent of the governed. We must have permission to do these things, which means they don't inherently have power. They can't just come together. Here's what I was trying to say. When you're born, is anyone born with power over you immediately? Outside of your parents, because they have to take care of you. Who is anyone born more equal than you? Is anyone born that is greater than you automatically?
I would say no.
No. So when you grow up, who gives anyone the right to tell you what you can and can't do? Outside, assuming that you're not trying to kill somebody or something like that. Mm-hmm. Who gives you the right to tell you can or can't do something? And where do they get that power from is the question.
That's a good question.
Because most people don't understand power. So when you have cops, let's say cops, where do cops get their power from?
The government.
Where does the government get its power from?
Well, it should be the people, really, yeah.
It comes from the people. So then who ultimately is in power?
Yeah, good point. The people.
Yeah. The people. And so we have to understand that fundamentally. So when we are doing the status quo, and we go back to the Afro thing and all the other stuff, and we're saying we're trying to appease somebody else. But if this somebody else doesn't have more power than us, then why are we trying to appease them? Okay. What makes this corporate entity tell me that I can't wear my hair a certain way? Who gave them the authority? Huh?
Does this go back to your point, the illusions that we give ourselves?
There you go. It's the illusion. Okay. But the illusion is not that we give ourselves. This is the illusion. Technically, it is an illusion we give ourselves, but it came from somewhere outside of us. Through watching TV, watching our parents interact a certain way, watching people interact a certain way. When you hear people talk about corporations, and you hear people talk about cops and all these other things. So through association, we kind of are like, oh, they have power because other people believe they have power. But we've never questioned that. Where do they actually get this power from? And when you do the logical search, you'll realize that it comes from me ultimately, or it comes from all of us. Okay. So when we're talking about a value system, where does our value system come from? And we have to look at that. Mm-hmm. Who was in power to tell us that you have to raise a child this way? A child, like when you think about court system and divorce and custody. And then they say, oh, in order for you to see your child, you need to have an apartment or a house with a separate room for them to sleep in. You can't sleep in the same bed, which is called co-sleeping, and you can't do all this stuff. Who the hell gave you the power to tell me how to raise my children? That's cultural bias. Because people in Africa sleep together with their children. People in Jamaica sleep together with their children. I slept together with my mom for quite some time before I got my own room. Mm-hmm. That wasn't an issue. That's our culture. So who is anyone to tell us that we can't live like that? Okay. So you got to think about that, where power comes from, in order to check the value system, in order to reduce the stress. So we can't ever we have to look at everything holistically. If we look at it in a very single focus, it just doesn't work. And so that's why saying that's the problem is always going to be wrong. It's not a one thing. It's going to be a series of things that we have to fix. So now we got the other slide pulled up. Let's pull that other slide up and get this thing going. So one of the other solutions that was offered in Hidden Colors for was economic solutions, right? So the things that they offered, the solutions, quote unquote, that were offered were group economics, building businesses, learning a trade, passing on general wealth, and boycotting things. Like, now what assumption is being made about what the problem is? What do you think? From what you see, what do you think the problem is?
That we don't have any of those things listed. We're not doing any of those things.
So, but what is the underlying problem? If it's economic problems. Well, I guess it's saying it right there. It's economic problems. We're not doing those things correct, but we have these economic issues. So you're assuming the problem to be economic. So what is economic? Well, herein lies the issue with the status quo. Because I'm saying status quo, and it's kind of a loose idea, but what it is economic. Status quo deals with economics, but when you understand what economics is basically the study of material wealth. And there's that key word, material wealth. Material wealth and wealth are two different things. Because when you put a word,
Yeah, expand on that for us, please.
So when you put a word in front of a noun or a verb, you have an adjective or an adverb. So with wealth being a noun in this case, you have an adjective. So you're modifying the word wealth. We're talking about material wealth. What wealth we have in actual physical objects, these literal things. The camera that I have, and the microphone that I'm using, and the laptop that we're controlling all this with, and the piano, and the fans, and everything, and the cars. GDP, growth national product, or whatever. That is how you're judging wealth. That is a value system. We're buying into that value system by participating in that system.
Mm-hmm.
If we stop participating in that system and change our value system, then we no longer will have these problems, like the stress that goes along with it. Because one thing that in economics that is never measured, they measure all this stuff, how productive people are, and you never measure how happy people are.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose that is a that is a big thing. That
what is the point if I'm not happy?
Lead to happiness, really. So
I buy this, I buy the car, I got the house, I got the children, 2.5, and a dog. How happy am I?
Yeah.
What's the point of all of it? Again, and at the end of it, I'm likely going to die of heart disease or diabetes, or if you have diabetes, you're more likely to die of heart disease because one exacerbates the other, or whatever else it is.
Mm-hmm.
If that whole time I did all this fighting and I was never happy, is it worth it?
No.
Are you telling me that my existence is to come on this planet, get a career that really serves no purpose in whatever it is I'm doing, as much as people want to say they do, depending on what it is, but in general, not really serving a purpose, to go out, get all these items, struggle comfortably, to the best of my ability, struggle comfortably, and then die, and have a few good times in between. Assuming you don't get divorced, assuming that you have enough communication skills and all that to avoid the problems with people, which is most problems people have are people problems, and to have good health.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a sad story too.
It's a sad story. It's a very sad story. So yes, when we're with our family, with our friends, we are having a good time. But do I need to have a career to do that? Mm-hmm. You know, when we look back in the day at our ancestors, what people love to tote and talk about, I don't ever remember ancient Egypt people talking about careers. People grew food, yeah, there were blacksmiths and people smelting things, but how did we find the time and the notion to come up with all these things that made us so great? Where did it come from? If we were stuck in a career, how did we have time to do these things? It doesn't make any sense, but people jump over those facts because they're mainly trying to prove that I have the solution. Man, you ain't got no solution. Because if you had a solution, as we showed in Hidden Colors, the first one, Hidden Solutions, the first webinar, if people had solutions, why are we still where we are? Why are your solution being repeated by everybody else? Because most people that I find are only looking at the symptoms. They've never broken it down further than this is the problem. They're not trained observers. They only have empirical evidence of what they can physically see. And within the scope of their very narrow life, they try to say, I've seen enough in life to say that that's the problem. I'm sorry, that is just wrong. And you're generally going to be wrong no matter what you say until you dig deep and ask the right questions. Now, there have been other people who have been correct, that have come, I would say correct, that have actually had solutions that were going in the right direction until they were either assassinated, probably for good reason, in terms of just people who are trying to keep the status quo. They're happy like that nigga got to go. And people who did try to do something, they were sabotaged.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't killed, but they were sabotaged. Why would you sabotage something if it wasn't going to be effective?
Okay. Do you have any examples?
Marcus Garvey.
Wow. Yeah, that is an extra example. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. King, before he changed, he's changing his idea. The speech that was in his pocket before he died that he was about to give was a change in the way he was talking. As I quote, quote unquote, I feel I have led my people into a burning building. Something like that.
Wow.
Was what Dr. King said. So it's funny how the media always promotes Dr. King as this one way, but that's because it helps the status quo. And that wasn't his final conclusion after all his running around and doing stuff. That wasn't it. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of examples, but they're all sabotaged. Either through assassination or literal sabotage.
Wow. Yeah.
And the evidence is there.
Do you think we should go back to, obviously, like you're saying, it's a good thing what they were doing? Should we be looking at what they were doing or tried to do and learn from that?
Well, the theory that they had was good, but it was a theory created in an environment that is different than we are now. The time difference is different. So if we just tried to apply it directly, it likely would not work the same. Mm-hmm. But what I propose is that we are, in the year 2016, we have the technology, we have the knowledge, we have the manpower and the resources. Why don't we're in a position unique to everybody on the planet that the post-slave black, outside of the people in the Caribbean, really in Europe and in America, are in a position where they have nothing. And most people find that as a bad position. That's because they have a very narrow view of things. When you have there's a quote by Alexander something. He's a Russian guy, Skovsky, whatever. I can't say it. But he wrote a novel called The First Circle. He says, and I quote mostly, give a man something and you can control him. But if you rob a man of everything, you no longer have control over that man. So if we're in a position where we have nothing, we're in a position where we can no longer be controlled. However, the problem is that we keep asking our oppressor for more. Okay. The more he gives us, the more control he has over us. Like you said earlier. Well, if I have this object, no one can take it from me if I build my garden. Mm-hmm. So what kind of control can someone say, I'm going to take your garden? Like, no, you can't. I know you can't take my garden. It's not yours.
Yeah, you just build another one.
There you go. I own the knowledge. No matter where I go, I can create a garden and create life. Yeah. So let's say we have a house that we built ourselves. Can any bank come and foreclose on you? No. So what level of control now does your job have if you choose to have one? Mm-hmm. Because if you get fired, what's the problem with getting fired from a job in a modern society?
What is the problem?
What's the problem with it?
Well,
why is that such a big issue?
You can't pay your bills.
There you go.
Yeah.
The bills become a massive issue because those people who are struggling comfortably are in the rat race. That wheel must keep turning. If that wheel ever stops, everything's going to come crumbling down very quickly.
Yeah.
Can't pay your phone, can't pay your cars, can't pay your lights, can't pay your mortgage, can't pay your rent. Then you got a homeless. And if you have kids, then you got to think, oh my God, I can't have my kids being homeless. That's even harder. Being homeless by myself is one thing. Being homeless with kids is a whole different story.
Of course. Definitely.
So that's why. So if we eliminate that control of us, then we got what we asked for, what we say we want. We don't want to be under the thumb of the man, which is really a figment of our imagination, but not going to go there. It's just that we don't want to be under control of anybody. So if you want to do that, build your garden and build your home. And then at that point we start talking about education.
Yeah.
Because until you have a community, you can't do widespread education. So let's talk about that for a second, because we have to talk about the other aspects of stress and health. When you look at the social dynamics of people, when a society is based on materialism, people are display antisocial behaviors. Now look at the world around you. Would you say that the modern people overall have good social skills?
Expand on that. Social skills. What do you mean by that?
Well, when you have antisocial behaviors, would you say that people are more antisocial now than before? They use Facebook and Snapchat and messaging online versus actually dealing with each other in person.
Oh, of course, definitely, 100%. You know, because I've even done that myself. Before, I would phone my friends more, but I'm like, oh, I saw you on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter. I saw you, you know, even though I didn't really. But you feel like you had that connection, so you don't necessarily need to pick up the phone or go around and visit. So yeah, totally.
So but that is when a society is based on more materialism, you start to display this. But now, how does that affect your kids? Look at the children growing up today, where they are displaying. They would rather sit in their basement online with friends that they've never actually physically met.
I know, I've seen that, and they walk around with the iPads, and they're not going out to play. Before, you'd be on your bikes and you'd be running around. Now they're literally, and all their games, their shopping games, and everything is online. It's crazy.
So what kind of social, like there was another, I want to say, there was a study done. I didn't look this study up, but it was saying that millennials, today's millennials, are less interested in sex than any other generation before them. They just don't care about it on the same level.
What did you call them?
Millennials.
What is that?
The millennials are the current generation.
Okay.
So the youngest generation there is are millennials right now.
Okay.
And we're like Generation Y and Generation X. Our parents were like baby boomers, all the other stuff.
Okay, I see. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
So our the current generation is less interested in sex than anybody. Well, look at how that's going to affect things. Look how things are being affected already. Yeah, feminists, third wave feminists coming through and wreaking havoc. Men are scared to approach women because they're afraid someone's going to yell rape on them. So, you know, things are going crazy. It seems like they're going crazy. Because a lot of things are
so, which goes back to your point about, I don't know, men are afraid to, I was a bit confused about that point. Where does that come from? About the men talking to women, they're scared they're going to call, that they attack them. Like,
all right, because we have a high single mother rate in the black community. It's higher than anybody else in the world, ultimately. There are no men around to teach men what to do.
Oh, okay.
So what they do, they resort to what they see on TV, which is easier to inject the status quo into their mind. If you want to get a woman, you have to do these things.
And what's on TV is not always good. Usually it's some kind of sensationalized.
What's on TV is trying to promote a product.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it's about. They're trying to say you have to have X, Y, Z to be sexy to get a woman or to get the opposite sex or to get a mate, for that, just to politically whatever, to get a mate, you need to have these things, which is going to cost you money. But if you were back in the day, you would know a man would tell you, I don't need these things. Obviously, you're here. I have a son or a daughter to talk to. You're here. I didn't have nothing. How'd I get with your mama? You have a father to tell you those things. But now they're not around to tell you those things as much. So they're going to resort to the streets or marketing to inject the status quo into their head. And then,
is that another stress in our community, that we don't know how to communicate and how to, because usually, I don't know, some communities have passages of rights to where you're now becoming a man, like Jewish people have they have a ceremony when they're about 13. Do you know what it is?
Oh, yeah, bar mitzvah. Yeah, that's back to the Jewish community. There they are again, the Jewish community.
Yeah, well, that's just one, but that's one that came to mind. But certain communities have rites of passages. I don't know if that's necessarily in a lot of black communities, possibly African communities.
I would say in the current black community, there is no rites of passage. Unless you shoot somebody, it's
my goodness.
Something else. You're a man now, you kill somebody. Yeah, it's very different, but that's with a gang mentality that we don't want to deal with, because we want to be alive long enough to pass your story on to someone else or pass on your legacy. So when we're dealing with the current generation, this is what we have. The future is going to be, and I don't plan on having any kids to have them grow up and not have a woman or a man or whatever they're interested in, and have and just be stressed and die of hypertension in the future.
No, that's not a good. Like we said, that's not a good story for anyone to go through, really. So that's what we wouldn't want. So I just wanted to go back and kind of just summarize what we've gone over, because it's been so interesting talking about some of these things that affect us, because you might not it doesn't necessarily come to mind, those things that you don't realize, how it is possibly in your everyday something that is causing you stress and it's leading to all these other things in your life. So we've gone over stress. Ultimately, stress is the leading. Stress-related diseases and ailments are the leading cause of death in the black community, not necessarily the things themselves. And when we start to examine our life and examine where the stress is coming from, the only place that I can logically conclude from looking at it is the idea of that I need to achieve certain things in society to be of value to society. And when one doesn't achieve that, they go to addiction and other things. And for women, how stress affects women is that they get depressed. So depression is already is well known to be underdiagnosed in the black community. But really, a lot of women are very depressed. When you're depressed, you lead to overeating and comfort eating, which leads to obesity. And if you look at the obesity rate in the black community, it's astronomical. When you look at that, because sometimes you go on a dating site and you would see an average body type. And I thought that meant like normal. You're not ripped to shreds, which is athletic, but you're kind of just there. You're normal. Okay. And when you see the average body type on a dating site, that means fat. Okay, really? Okay.
It means fat, ultimately. When you see women say they're average, but they're not lying. Average is big. That it is big right now. But our black women are depressed. So they resort to and then going back to stress, it limits the way the body can do things. So you have serotonin, which is depleted in the body. And serotonin aids in your ability to absorb in your digestive system. And we talked about stress at the bottom. One of those symptoms was digestive issues. Well, if I'm not absorbing anything in my body, but I'm getting all the calories, just the calories of it, I'm just getting bigger. That's it. I'm just keep getting bigger. And so you see all these women walking around bigger, which is a sign of depression. And then you have the issues from obesity that start to cause other issues. So then they start to die from obesity-related diseases, where obesity exacerbates hypertension and obesity exacerbates cardiovascular disease. But it really all started from stress.
Okay.
So when you always trace it back and back and back, it starts from stress. So that's kind of what we talked about so far. And if we want to fix the issues in the black community, we must attack the root of the cause, which is stress. And the only way that can happen, every other solution is trying to find a solution within a system that's very sole purpose is to extract the life out of you.
Okay.
Almost by definition, that's what being in a modern society is about. It's about taking from you, not giving you anything. All we're doing is taking. So you cannot ever come up with a solution that is within this realm of modern society. You'll never find a solution. That's why if you look at every other solution that I talked about that was sabotaged or someone was assassinated, every single one was talking about separating. Malcolm X was talking about separating. And that integration was one of the worst things we've ever done as a people. Because as a people, the black community is in its adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
We are still young and trying to figure things out. Well, all the other communities are very old. We're still very young and we don't have it quite figured out yet. It's like we're serial daters. It's like you ever know a girl who dates one guy, moves in with him, and then when that relationship breaks up, she dates another guy, she's in a relationship immediately. And she's with that person, and that may break up, then she's in another relationship immediately. From the day she left her house into the 20, 30 years, that's all she's been doing. But she's never ever had time to herself to know who she is. All her likes and desires are the likes and desires of the last boyfriend she was with. That's it. So,
but yeah, it's been so very interesting speaking today. Like I said, it's really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily have thought about. Like we talked about the garden and how it can change our value systems and how it can bring us closer together by bringing us into an environment where we're trading amongst each other and helping each other and working towards a common goal. And we also talked about, stress and, the hormones that are in our bodies and how it affects us, just in our daily lives with, like you could say like the eating and, and not having empathy for each other, so I think we've gone over lots of very good topics and, I think that will really help all of our listeners that are listening in today. But I would like to thank you, Kurt, for giving us all this information. It's been much appreciated. And, and I hope to talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay then. Thank you.